There were mainly two reasons for me to be kind of intrigued by it. The first was actually because their designs were exactly interface, so they were very applicable and very usable. But secondly was because the way they were designed, so the process behind the design. And the process behind the design, which intrigued me, was actually that they were designed through, you would say, kind of idea of craftsmanship. So they were not designed for the sake of design, but they were rather designed from the functional aspect first. And then, of course, going through the layers of material, detailing, how to produce it, and so on and so on. And this is exactly what we try to achieve in our architecture to some extent, is to create a design which is not purely a shape, but rather kind of, you would say, a combination of a whole lot of factors that lead up to the final shape. The thing is that private clients are in a way they are very demanding. But once you find a way to set up a good communication system with them, they actually are also extremely rewarding because you can really make choices with them. And in our way of working, we have developed almost a methodology on how to start a design process with a private client, because they always have very particular wishes. And they also always have very particular dreams about their house. They come to you and they say like, well, we really want a house, this is our budget, and we want a bathroom of 20 square meters, and we want a living room of 40 square meters. And we mostly say like, well, that actually doesn't really matter. You know, the size of the living room is totally unimportant in relation to how you want to live. You know, I mean, do you want to have a formal dining room, or do you want to eat on the couch watching TV? I mean, it's interesting that in most houses, the living patterns have changed so dramatically that some people do their kind of their work in the kitchen, and they eat behind the television, and they kind of read in the bathtub. You know, I mean, it's a kind of totally upside down house in a way. One of the things I would say is that sustainability will become out of fashion in the way it is now, because now every architect is trying to claim to create the most sustainable building ever. I think sustainability, for instance, will become a lot more like structure. It will become something that has to be good in your building. I think it's pretty interesting if you think about it that 5 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, structural engineers were really creating spectacular buildings. Big cantilevers, very high towers. I think now this emphasis of, you would say, engineer consultants has shifted to the mechanical engineer or the sustainability engineer. So now we're seeing very sustainable buildings. But they don't really change necessarily how we create architecture. I think architecture still is designed in the same way. So in a way, you would say like this greenwashing we see now, all these kind of green buildings that are designed by everyone with green facades, I think this will disappear for sure, and it will go back to just architecture. Another thing which I think will become very, very important is to find alternative ways to finance architecture. Because now the last 10 years has been financed mainly by big loans and by big developers. But I think we will start to look at a model where the money that is basically generated for architecture is coming again from people that really own the money, and not from people that borrow the money. How are we going to see cities designed after this splurge, you would say? I think it will be very much based on the way we will finance the future city. You know, I think we can see that in Europe, that problem already arising. Cities like Berlin, the only real big extensions they have made or the big projects they have done are financed by private capital. I mean, look at Potsdamer Platz, for instance. But the state itself is very incapable at the moment of financing very good city building operations, and this is a problem in Holland as well. I mean, in the 90s, the cities in Holland, they sold all their land to private developers, and they have almost no means to control the city anymore. The city planning department of Rotterdam, for instance, was once, let's say, 1,000 people. Now it's 1/3 of what it was 15 years ago. So I mean, I think there's many problems on that issue. I also think that because we outsourced all these things, we have in European cities, we have very little control over it. And architects, to be honest, are quite hopeless in this because they can only design buildings, but then they're mostly budgeted out of design processes. So I'm not sure, it's going to be very difficult, I think. But at the same time, it's very clear that more than ever, I think, cities need to be lively and cities need to be attractive in order for them to economically survive. And that's what's been so interesting, I would say, about Scandinavian cities, is that they have created a kind of very interesting mix between a very strong public sector and at the same time a very good urban structure. So that's a very interesting model somehow. The architect is not an artist, but he's also not an engineer. You know, he's kind of in between, which is sometimes also what makes the practice so dramatically annoying, because you never have the freedom to say "fuck off," you know, like an artist would do. But neither do you have the kind of authority to say, like, yeah, well, it's a fact that it has to be like this, you know, because I'm an engineer. So you're always kind of caught in between. But I guess the beauty of it is that when it works out,